Hey, welcome to Books and Brew. I'm your host, Andrew Huff. I'm a novelist, screenwriter, director, all around media producer. And this show is all about getting to know fellow authors and how they go about writing their books so that I can steal their secrets for my own success. Now, here's the thing I know about writers is when we write, we love to have something to drink right along with us. Then that can come in a lot of different forms, a lot of times coffee and tea. So what I thought would be fun is while we get to know all about these writers, get to know about their books and what it takes to become a writer, I get to try their favorite writing brew right along with them. So let's meet today's guest and find out what I am going to be drinking. Amanda Nguyen is an award-winning writer of inspirational romance and split-time women's fiction. Her debut novel, Roots of Wood and Stone, was released by Kregel Publications on January 26th of this year. In addition to her writing, Amanda is an accomplished professional cellist and pianist who frequently performs with orchestras, chamber groups, and her church's worship team. Amanda currently lives in Kansas with her patient, loving, and hilarious husband, their 3 adorable Wenlets, and a snuggly Siamese cat. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I am really excited about our conversation because you're I'm going to say you're a brand new author, but this is one of the things that I think you probably have heard and I have heard, and I want other writers to hear as well, is we often think we're not really a writer until we publish that thing, right? So Amanda, your book came out this year, but you've been a writer for a while.
Yeah. Most of my life, actually, I've I wrote stories for fun when I was a kid, and then school kind of took over and sucked all the fun out of writing for a little bit. And then once I got done with school, I was an adult. It was 2008 when I started having story ideas. So I didn't write consistently because I started getting ideas in 2008. I started having babies in 2009. So from 2009 to 2013, writing was kind of just not a thing that happened. But then when my youngest was about a year old, I started getting ideas again. So I would say seriously writing since about 2014.
Yeah. Well, and so there you go. Seriously writing since about 2014. And yet it is a long process to get to that finished book. But as I know, I've been encouraged by others in this, and I'm sure you've heard it as well, that you are no less a writer or no less an author just because you haven't had anything published. You started your writing journey in 2013, 2014, and it took as long as it needed to take. And yet at the time, you became a writer because if you write down anything, you're a writer.
Yep, you are.
So we are going to hear about your book in just a second. But the fun part about this show is I get to drink your favorite writing brew, which is going to be a really fun one today. So I want to hear what you like to drink when you're writing.
Well, I do my best writing when I'm not at my house. So I tend to go, I frequent a lot of local coffee shops. I've got my favorite little haunts. And one of my absolute favorite places is called Coco Dolce. They are a local, we're drinking their coffee, but they're mostly known for their chocolate. They do homemade truffles. They have their own little factory here in Wichita, and they do chocolates, they do gelato, they do all kinds of coffee drinks and other drinks, and I have never had anything there that I don't like. My best friend's also a writer, and she lives here, and she and I started meeting at Coco Dolce once a week just to kind of talk about life and writing and stuff. She and I were best friends in middle school, and we reconnected when I moved back to our hometown, and that was in 2010 that we reconnected. And so we've been having mostly weekly coffee dates at Coco Dolce when we can ever since then. So,
nice. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, Amanda, I have Coco Dolce house blend coffee on French press. It's going to steep for about 5 minutes, and that is when you get to pitch your book or books. Tell us what you've written, why we should buy it, because we're all going to go do that, and what you're working on right now.
Okay. Well, this is my debut novel. This is Roots of Wood and Stone. It's a split time that revolves around an old farmhouse that belongs to a family that features in both the past timeline and the present timeline. This farmhouse is actually based on a real one that is not too far from where I live now, and it belonged to some ancestors of mine. So some of their story made it into the fictional version. So our contemporary timeline, we have a historical museum curator who falls in love with this house and is wanting to preserve it. And she's going to run up against Garrett, he's a financial planner. He's one of those, like, I want to have all my ducks in a row. His grandma is living in this farmhouse. She has Alzheimer's. He's like, she's not going to be able to live here on her own much longer. We need to move her to a nursing home, and they're going to have to sell the house to make that happen. So Garrett and Sloan are at odds about the house, but they are discovering that they are not at odds when it comes to each other. And while Garrett's cleaning out the house, he finds some diaries that belong to an 1870s pioneer in Kansas. And so that's the past timeline. It revolves around this pioneer woman, and it covers her pretty much her whole life. It starts when she's 9. And I think the last we hear from her, she is in her 70s, I think. So, but most of the past timeline is going to be from 1870-ish to about 1890. So right when Sedgwick County, Kansas, which is where Wichita is getting started. So that is that book. And then currently I am working on a Christmas novella that I will be doing for a collection that Kregel is releasing next fall. I get the privilege of working with Deb Rainey, who is, I don't think I need to introduce Deb Rainey, just perennial awesome author. She used to live in Wichita, actually, so I got to have coffee with her a few times. And we are also co-writing with Janier Tromp, who I'm pretty sure you know her from Kregel. She's an editor at Kregel, but she's also an author now. Her debut is coming out soon, like next winter, I think, from Kregel. And then we'll have the novella together next fall. So we're each writing it all in the same small town in Michigan. And my story takes place in the 1910s, and Janier's is World War II era, and Deb's will be contemporary. So we're same small town in 3 little snapshots of history. So that's awesome. That collection will be called Oh Little Town, after O Little Town of Bethlehem. And each of us will be taking a verse from the hymn as our title. Mine is tentatively called Hopes and Fears from verse 1. I don't know if that'll stick, but that's what I'm calling it for right now. I know Kregel's really good at titling stuff, so if they decide to change it, that's fine with me. I know Roots of Wood and Stone was not originally called that.
So. Oh yeah, none of my novels had their original names either.
Yeah, it's like the trade marketing questionnaire. They're like, what other titles have you considered? And for my first book, it was like, all of these. And then subsequent books, I haven't thought about titles at all, because you guys are like really good at that.
Right. So. Just slap something on there. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, you guys will figure it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, I'm sure you have not just the novella on the horizon. I'm sure you've got other story ideas.
I do.
And I'm interested in knowing if your desire is to continue writing split time fiction, or if you're like, actually, I've got like, I'm going to encroach on your territory, Andy, and write suspense thrillers. So
split time suspense thrillers.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, well, Jamie Jo Wright does suspense. I don't know if there's a count as thrillers. I'm not as familiar with the thriller genre, so I don't know what is and is not a thriller, but most of my ideas now are split time. I like kind of how the present intersects with the past, and how like decisions from the past have ripple effects on the future. And so I really like kind of exploring how those work together. And I probably come by that honestly because my mom's a genealogist. So she has, I've grown up with stories of the past, like just all around me, knowing that, okay, some battle that we're learning about in high school history class. Oh, you had an ancestor that fought in that one. Here's the monument with his name on it. I mean, history became very, very personal to me because of my mom's research. And so I think I'm very in touch with how the past can influence the present. Plus, watching my mom discover stuff about our ancestors it's thrilling for her, and we kind of live vicariously through that. And I always love hearing what she comes up with. So
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, that's 5 minutes. So
Okay.
the coffee is ready to go. I've got the French press right here. We're going to give it a press, and then we're going to pour this coffee in. And you can't see it, but I've got a coffee cam so everybody can see the pour happening.
Coffee cam.
Yeah.
Nice.
We're going to see that color. It actually looks really good. It smells really good too. All right. Okay, so here's how the show works, right? I'm not going to tell you what I think about the coffee until the very end.
Okay.
So after the first sip, you just have to try to read my face to know,
okay,
what does he think, right?
all right, you keep us in suspense then, huh?
Yeah. But as a suspense writer, I'm probably really
Exactly,
good at
you have
not
to.
showing my emotions, and so
Very on brand for you.
yeah. So first sip, here we go. Oh, it's going to probably be really loud too, but I haven't gotten any comments about the first sip, but I try to leave it in just so everybody can enjoy.
That works.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to put it right back, and we'll see what happens. If it's gone by the end of it, maybe that's a good sign. So, all right. So we got our writing brew with us. We've heard about your books. This show, as I always mention at the top, is about me stealing everybody's secrets.
Okay.
But I think what would be fun for us that people can steal our secrets from is getting to that first novel, getting to that debut novel. I would love to hear your story of getting to that to publication. And I have shared bits and pieces of mine, but it's just a fun it's it's a hard process.
There are fun moments.
A long process. Yes, there are fun moments. So I would love to hear your story about your getting to your debut novel.
Okay. Well, I think, I was kind of writing for fun late 2000s, I guess the late aughts. I don't know what we're calling that decade. But
yeah.
After I had kids and started writing semi-seriously, I mentioned my best friend. She was multi-published in the general market by this time. So, and at the time I didn't know whether I wanted to do general market or Christian market. I was just writing. And I finally, after we'd had coffee dates together for about 4 years, and I mean, this is my middle school best friend. So she saw me with like the brick wall bangs and the perm and everything. She has seen me at my worst. It took me 4 years to get up the guts to show her anything I had written. And when I did, she was like, well, here's all the newbie writer errors that you're making, but you have promise. And so she kind of took me under her wing, and I wrote probably 2 or 3 desk drawer novels that will probably never, ever see the light of day, especially the first one. And after a couple of those, then she said, you might want to start thinking about entering contests. And that's how she got her start, was a RWA contest, of Romance Writers of America. And so I was kind of like, okay, where do I find a contest? Well, another friend of mine who is herself also a general market author, but she had heard about the ACFW First Impressions contest. She said, why not this one? It's only 5 pages. And I had heard stories of authors just getting eviscerated in contests. And I was like, well, if they tear apart my first 5 pages, it's just 5 pages. It's not going to inflict a deep injury on my soul. It's only 5 pages. So I entered it. And then I finaled in it. And then I won. And I was like, what?
Nice.
And one of the final round judges said, hey, if you don't already have a literary agent, I'd like to see your full manuscript. And it was Tamala Hancock Murray, who's one of the, she's a pretty big agent in the Christian world. I didn't know who she was. I had to Google her. And I called my best friend. I'm like, this agent wants to see my book. What do I do? She said, you send it to her.
Right. Yeah.
So I did. And it took over a year for me to hear back from Tamala.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because agents, their priority is their existing clients. And as an author with an agent, I appreciate that I'm a priority to her. But so they have to kind of like do acquisition reading in their off hours. So it can take a long time to hear back from an agent. And I think I even nudged her a couple of times, like, are you still considering this, or should I interpret the silence as a no? And I would always get yeah, I'm still going to get to it. Stay tuned, you know? So then she took me on, and we shopped that book around, and it did not sell. And I was like, okay, that's kind of annoying. But that one was a contemporary romance, which was not, I didn't really feel like I fit in that genre quite. I mean, that was all the ideas I was getting, but it's like, I don't think that this is fully me. And I got an idea for a split time, and I said, well, maybe I'll try that. And what I didn't know about split time when I started writing is basically you got to write 2 books and combine them into one, because you've got the past story that has to be a coherent beginning, middle, end, hero, heroine. And then you have to do the same thing in the contemporary story. They have to be equally interesting. And they have to communicate well with each other, because if you can lift one of them out, then that you don't have a truly organic split time story. I didn't know any of this when I started. So I was like, okay, fine, how hard can it be? Ridiculous. But I did finish that one. And I told Tamala what I was working on, and she said, I don't do a lot of split time. It's kind of hard to sell, but I love your writing, so I will market anything that you write. And I think then we went on submission with this one. And I think around the same time, I started becoming Twitter friends with Janir Trump. And I had no idea what she did for a living. I didn't know she was an editor. We just started talking, and we became friends. And then one of our mutual friends was like, you know, she's the acquisitions editor for Kregel, right? And I was like, what? So then I'm scrolling back through all of our Twitter exchanges, making sure that I haven't said anything dumb. But I requested a pitch session with her at ACFW, and she knew that I was coming. So she read my book on the plane. And I met her at ACFW, she said, oh, by the way, I'm 3/4 of the way through your book and I love it. And I'm going, so nice. I don't have to give you the awkward little elevator pitch tomorrow? She's like, no, we're good. So it wasn't too long after that it was about a year after that I finally got the contract offer. I think it took a while. I mean, that's one of the things that I had no idea about, was just publishing takes forever. Because I started writing Roots of Wood and Stone in 2017, and it was out in 2021. And that's pretty quick.
Right.
So, and it takes about a book and a year then from when you sign the contract to when the book goes to press. Because they have to do all the stuff on their end, and there's revisions, and there's cover stuff, and there's marketing stuff, and and
I think that's maybe one of the things that potential writers don't realize is the books, once you sign the contract, especially for a debut, let me back up, for a debut author, and I did this and you did this, the book's written. I mean, you can't sell an idea unless you have you're just someone who's famous and you have a built-in audience, and you want to write a book, and there's going to be people that buy it because, you've got a built-in audience. Other than that, if you're just writing stories, you got to write the book, and then you got to try to sell the book, and that book may never sell. So
that's right.
So I have the book that never sold, just like you have the books that never sold.
Although, you know what? I'm really grateful for that book, because it taught me a lot of stuff, and it got me my agent. You got to cut your teeth on it. God used it how he needed it to use. And I'm kind of okay with not being a contemporary romance author. Like I hadn't really found my niche yet when I wrote that book. And I think being pigeonholed into that genre right now, I think I would not feel like it was quite the right fit for me. Nothing against contemporary romance. I read it, and I have a lot of friends who write it, and they're great at it. It just wasn't truly me, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, even so, you have the book that's written, and you get the contract, and you do it again, because there's not that you're rewriting the whole thing, as much as often it's going through several rounds
Mm-hmm.
of revisions. And
Yep.
so it's a process even after, because as you've told your story and we've seen the process that it took to even get to that contract,
Uh-huh.
there's even a process after that,
Yep.
with things like editing, with things like book cover design and all that kind of stuff. And I'm grateful for that time as a writer.
Yeah,
Like I
definitely. Well,
wouldn't want a contract that's like, all right, your book's coming out in 3 months and we're gonna do, yeah. And
no.
so I'm like grateful for that time to be able to work with that team and get it
Uh-huh.
to the point where it actually is going to be a marketable, successful book.
Yeah, I'm really, really grateful for them because I mean, I was pretty proud of my book when I submitted it to them,
Mm-hmm.
but then after it went through revisions, I read it again, when you do the galley proofs and it's your last time to see the book and you're sick of it. But I was like, wow, this book is much better than I ever thought that it could
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
So,
So, I mean, that's kind of and it's not an arrogant thing to say it as a writer, but I
no.
had the same experience where I'm reading it and I'm like, I actually think this is kind of good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sick of it. Yes. But, I still
Yeah.
smile sometimes with like something I wrote or,
Yeah.
and, yes, it's, I wrote it, but it's obviously the team that's involved in getting it to
Yeah.
the shape that it's in. And
Well,
so that's
they are
really
part
exciting.
of why I'm so proud of it because
Yeah.
it would not be what it is without them. Janir is actually responsible for my very favorite scene in the whole book. She said, I think we need maybe one more courtship type scene between your past couple. And I was like, okay. And I kind of had a couple ideas, ran with it. And my critique partners were like, this is the best scene you've ever written. Like, we love this scene and I love it. It is by far my favorite in the whole book. So, and
That's
I
awesome.
think I mentioned that in the acknowledgments for engineers. Like,
Yeah.
thanks for giving me the idea for my very favorite scene.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
I think one of the key things that you pointed out, and the way that I think about it is having someone that's not me reading it, because the goal is that the book is marketable in a sense
Yes.
of you try to get the widest audience possible. And so, if I only looked for readers that were exactly like me and appreciated the exact same things as me, my audience is going to probably end up being pretty small. And so to be able
Yes.
to hear from other people, and I think that's the attitude that an author can take into it, especially a debut author,
Uh-huh.
and having some of this thrown at them in terms of changes, is to go at it less in a people want to just change it because they want to, or they're not brilliant like me, so they don't know
Right.
what they're talking about or whatever. But it's a goal and it's a desire to tell the clearest story possible,
Mhm.
but also a story that connects as wide as possible,
Yes.
and yet for you, split time fiction, you're already uh, you're targeting readers that like that kind of fiction,
Uh-huh.
right? Even for me, writing an action thriller shrinks the target
Uh-huh.
from just any sort of normal fiction. Uh, but you don't want to continue to further shrink that target by
Mm.
making it appeal only to a reader like me,
Yes.
and so I think that's the value that editors bring, and agents as well, because an agent
Yes.
will read the book, and people have done, which I haven't done that. I actually have not done this yet, but I'm going to do it with a book that I'm working on. Have beta readers, even
Oh yeah.
where have beta readers, have editors read it, have your agent read it, have friends read it, but
Mm-hmm.
not to look for the praise that would come, but to go, is this going to have a wide enough
Yeah.
audience to where it makes sense? Because, if you start hearing the same things from several people that maybe are slightly different readerships than you, it might tell you something in terms of, okay, hold on, if I make this change, that's going to open up a whole new world of readers that will connect with
Yes.
my story, and make it successful. So anyway, that's kind
Yeah.
of a long-winded way to affirm what you're saying, rather than
Well, and
just
like
listen to Amanda.
you touched on beta readers, and like one of my beta readers is her job is to make sure I don't get preachy.
Nice.
She is not actually a believer. She doesn't read Christian fiction except for mine. She loves
Oh,
my
wow.
writing style. So she, she said, I don't read. She likes clean romance, which is,
Oh, yeah.
romance without any of the smutty
Right.
bits, which, writing inspirational, that's, part and parcel with that. But I always want her to, like, I don't want you to feel like I am preaching at you. I mean, yes, I'm praying for her as she reads my books, but she tells me, like, if this going to be off-putting to someone who's maybe not a believer, but who picks up my book in a store, like, I wonder what this is about. Because some people just won't. If they know it's Christian fiction, they won't read it. Some people are kind of like, well, I'm open to it as long as it's not going to make me feel like they're thumping me on the head with a Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And, ultimately what we want to do, whether we're writing for the Christian market or the general market, is to tell a good story. And if a character feels or if a reader feels like you're preaching at them, whether they are a believer or not a believer, it's like, that's not a good story to me.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I would say this because I think sometimes there is a little bit of tension, especially maybe in a young writer or a young reader.
Mm-hmm.
I don't say, I mean, young, let me back up, not young necessarily as age, as much
Right.
as new to, this,
Yeah.
to that there's that tension between feeling called to share the gospel and not coming across as being too preachy.
Right.
And I would just say that the general market is guilty of the same thing. I
Yes,
mean,
they are.
when the general market is preachy, we don't like it either,
No, we don't.
And so there is something to just a story being obviously driven by an agenda or driven by
Right.
a particular world, the desire to push particular worldview,
Uh-huh.
versus that agenda or that worldview informing a story,
Right.
to where at the end of the day, it's the story,
Mm-hmm.
and that worldview may have informed it one way or the other, but it was just a great story. And so
Yeah.
I think that's just, not that I've necessarily gotten into like conversations about this, but I kind of wonder like how people feel about that tension in terms of how much to infuse their fiction with
Right.
Christian themes and Christian topics and
Uh-huh.
teaching points. And I think that's the goal, is to strike for that balance, right?
And I think a lot of others, like, I know some authors that have a lot of overt Christian content in their books, and that's how what they feel called to do. Like, that's like, this is how this informs my story. This is, and then there are other authors that, like, you don't necessarily know that it's a Christian story,
Mm-hmm.
but as a Christian who is sharing the worldview, you can, like, see Christian themes and stuff in books. Like, oh, well, I think fantasy does this very well. I think it's pretty easy to create a world for a fantasy writer, which I'm definitely not, but you can create a whole lot of symbolism, like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and people who strive to be like those guys. Like, you can tell a Christian story without mentioning Jesus at all.
Yes.
And so for somebody who's not a Christian who's reading it, it's a really good story. And for somebody who is a Christian who's reading it, it's like, oh, I recognize that's Jesus.
Yeah, right.
He just showed up on the page. So it's harder to do that in the real world, I think. I mean, I don't know. I've never, like I said, I've never tried to write a fantasy book. That would be so far beyond me. It would not even be funny. I have the utmost admiration for people who can build entire worlds. I'm like, no, I got to stick with what I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just lazy. I'm too lazy to spend the time to create the...
That too.
Yeah, right. All right.
I mean, historical fiction involves some world building, but at least you can go back and research it.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't just start from scratch.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, it's come to the coffee review time.
Oh.
It's basically
gone.
So, good sign. Really good coffee. I approve.
Glad.
Yeah. And I don't know if I'm not enough of a coffee snob to talk about the flavors and the, notes that
not either. Like, is it good? Yes, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I drank it and I would drink it again. Like,
oh, good. I'm glad you liked it.
I will say, not that anyone on the show that has come on the show, this has not been the case, because again, I'm not a coffee snob, but I can definitely think of like some hotel coffees, that I'd be like, yeah, I'm fine. Like I'll stop by
Yeah.
a gas station before I'll go back to
Uh-huh.
that.
Me
So,
too.
so I mean, this was really good. So,
Good.
great job. And hey, this is what I tell everybody. If you want to finally make it as a writer, you got to pick up your own Coca Dolce house blend and drink it, and you'll be as successful as Amanda will is. So there you go.
Yeah,
That's the secret.
absolutely. It's the secret.
Now, Amanda, let us know how we can find you. Where can we find you? Where can we order your book? Like, tell us.
Okay. The book is available wherever you buy books. I'm always a proponent of supporting local businesses, and most local bookstores, like if they don't have it on the shelf, they will order it for you. If you are a local Wichita person, you can get it at Faith and Life Bookstore up in Newton, which is just about half hour from here, or you can get it at Watermark. And depending on where in Wichita you live, that might be a half-hour drive for you too. So website is www.amandawen.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter there. That will give you the absolute up-to-date latest on upcoming projects, and there's going to be some good news in that shortly-ish. So kind of hint there. And there's also a free short story in there for you. Anybody that signs up for the newsletter, it's automatic download, get a little Valentine's Day contemporary, just little fun thing I wrote a couple of years ago. And I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. And I was on Twitter, but I kind of had to leave Twitter for my own mental health. So Facebook and Instagram is mostly where you can find me. Instagram, I mostly do book stuff. Facebook, I mostly talk about my funny kids and the crazy stuff they do. So
nice.
You like funny kids stories, you can friend me there.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to have all that linked to in the show notes. And if you want to find out more about the novels that I have written and all the different projects that I'm involved in, you can go to my author website, andrewhuffbooks.com. There are links to all of my social platforms there as well. And you can find me on all of them. And so really appreciate your time, Amanda. Love the coffee, love chatting with you, and really excited for to see the new stories that you're going to be writing coming up soon.
Thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Hey, I hope to have coffee in person with you sometime soon.
Yes, that would be great.